All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. Ask the experts about lowering the cost of your NAV upgrade. And of course, like all of our webinars, we do record this. It'll be up on our website later today, which is abc-computers.com. And at that, we will hand it over to Ben Bolte.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start off here by just going through a little bit of introduction about ABC for those of you who are not familiar with, and then we'll jump into the content for the remaining part of the call here. So a little bit about ABC. We're in the IT services business. We really focus primarily around the Dynamics division area, and what sets us apart from the competition a little bit is we also do a lot on the infrastructure side of NAV, not just the development, support, and implementation. We've been in business a little over 30 years now. We've grown steadily over the last few years. We're up to 52 team members, spread out over 4 corporate locations with a bunch of satellite locations where people work from home. Primary headquarters is in Waupaca, Wisconsin, and we also have offices out of Rhinelander, on Alaska, and then South Bend, Indiana. We primarily work with the SMB space and help businesses leverage technology to become more productive and profitable. This is just a list of a handful of companies that we work with to help their businesses leverage the vision more effectively for that purpose. On the call today, we're joined by a couple other staff members here at ABC. Massman, who heads up he's our services director, which oversights all of the services divisions at ABC. He's got 7 years of project manager experience extensively in the Dynamics NAV area, and has 24 years of experience supporting a line of businesses applications across the board. Chad Williams is our development manager. He's been with ABC for a little over 11 years and has moved up from just doing the day-to-day development, so to speak, to overseeing our development team, and has a lot of experience around the upgrade side of things. And last but not least, myself, Ben Bolte. I'm a technology architect here at ABC. I've been with the company just a little over 10 years and have about 22 years of experience in technology consulting. So today we want to take a little bit of time to discuss some of the things that we've learned about upgrading NAV and things that can be done to help lower the cost of it. At ABC Computers, we've learned that there are a lot of factors that play into the cost of upgrades that most people don't even think about. Without having the experience of doing a lot of upgrades, there's a lot of details that don't come to mind. Without first working through all these details, the cost of an upgrade can skyrocket. So let's talk about some of the things that commonly run into first, and then we're going to open this up for discussions and give you guys a chance to ask the questions that come to your mind. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so if something that comes to mind while we're speaking, feel free to type it in the questionnaire piece in the GoToMeeting, and afterwards we'll also open it up so you can ask questions. And I'll do this, or I say the same for Ron and Chad. If they have thoughts or ideas that come to mind as I'm speaking, feel free to interrupt also. So one of the most common things we hear with our customers is whether they should consider upgrading or re-implementing it. It's a really great question, but it's not an easy one to answer. We find that there's a lot of variables that play into this decision. One of the first things that come to mind is how old a version you're running. It's a huge factor on what's the right decision for your company. If you've been on NAV for a long time, you might be running a version of Seaside for the database, or maybe you've gone through the upgrade from that perspective or on the SQL version, but you're still running the classic client instead of the role tailored client. These are just a few of the technical hurdles that we find are fairly easy to work through, but they're huge factors on what you might want to do from that perspective. What we find is the bigger question is what's changed in your business since you were either last upgraded or originally implemented. We find that most customers have been on the version they're on for a couple years, or it's been a really long time. And in neither of those cases, in today's business, things are changing fast and the required processes to support them are also. We also find that there may be features that you don't use any longer, or features that you want to add. This is one of those slippery slopes. In the pure sense, an upgrade isn't adding functionality or features, but when you're going through an upgrade, sometimes you have to do that because of things have changed in the version of software, and you might have been running a third-party ISV or some custom development that required or was required in the past and it's no longer because of some added features. Another thing that we find is that these custom features are now part of the base feature set, or could be. You know, one of the greatest things about Dynamics NAV is that the team at Microsoft is listening to its end users. They're constantly adding new features to the base product, and oftentimes we find those new features are things that we had to do custom in the past. And one of the things to consider is there may be ISV add-ons that you're using that are also not supported in the new version that you're upgrading to. And if not, you're going to have to find either an alternative solution from an ISV or do some custom development in that area. We believe the decision to upgrade or re-implement is one of the biggest decisions you're going to have to do, and we recommend working with either us or another NAV partner to do an assessment to consider the pros and cons for your business to determine what's the best solution. There's no one answer that applies to everyone's. And we feel that the work done in the assessment ahead of time goes a long ways towards the required work that you're going to have to do either way. And we feel it sets the stage and helps set expectations before investing a lot of time and money and energy. One of the next areas that we run into a lot is from a hardware compatibility perspective. This is an area that we see often overlooked because most people have the servers that they come to mind as things they might have to evolve, so to speak, as you go through an upgrade. But it's easy to overlook the other hardware and software that you use. You need to be sure that the operating systems that the client devices are using are still supported in the new version. Things that we take for granted like Office that integrates with NAV isn't always supported in the newer versions. If you're looking at 2015, only Windows PCs that are running 7 and 8 are supported. And also from an Office perspective, you must be at 2010 or newer. And if you're running any XP machines, they're going to have to be replaced before you can do the upgrade. It's a bit of a slippery slope, though, when you start changing out some of the client devices, because then you have to confirm that your printers and other peripherals are also going to work. So it's all things to keep in mind. You also might find yourself with a large amount of hardware that needs to be replaced. And this is a great time that you might want to consider the cloud. It gives you a great chance to get current with everything that you're on and lower the cost of entry. It also allows you to get out of the IT business and focus on what you guys do best. With the cloud, you have the option to host your infrastructure in Microsoft's Azure cloud or other providers' hosting services. This is known as an infrastructure as a service model, and that's where you control everything from the virtual machines all the way to your data. While it gives you the greatest amount of flexibility, it also gives you the most responsibility of any of the cloud service models. Another term that you're going to hear a lot in the industry when you start looking at cloud stuff is software as a service. The difference is here, you only have to control the data layer. The service provider provides support for the hardware layer, the virtual machines, all the way up to your application. And I tell customers all the time, like from an analogy perspective, kind of think of it as a phone company. With the phone service, all you have, the carrier, the hosting company in this case, takes care of everything up to the dial tone. If you have a dial tone at your building, it's not their issue. If you don't, you call them and they'll take care of it. A common software solution that runs as a software as a service model that you might be familiar with already is Office 365, Salesforce, even Hotmail. They're all examples of a software as a service model. And we say this point here to the end because we feel it's probably the biggest area that you actually have the most control over. While the other topics that we touched on here all have effects, there's only so much you can do to affect it. The software that you're going to upgrade to needs certain hardware just to meet the requirements and those type of things. So you can only do so much. But your business needs your business needs the software to operate more effectively. You're either going to purchase hardware or you're going to have somebody host it for you. But the amount of ownership you take in the upgrade or reimplementation is what we feel you have the biggest effect in lowering your cost. End user training is a huge part of the upgrade. Depending on the version you're coming from and upgrading to, this can be a huge area that we see overlooked oftentimes. Users might understand the process or the workflow of their jobs in NAV because they've been doing it for years, but the screens can look completely different depending on what version you're upgrading from or to. As a customer, you have access to Customer Source, and there's a lot of great tools there to help you train your staff on the new versions of NAV and learn about the new products and features. Another thing that we see on understanding is what areas of NAV you're actually using. Reports are a really big one. As management changes and the use of NAV changes over the years, we find that reports that were once necessary are no longer used. We have a report tracking tool that we work with our customers to load on their systems that analyzes this over a period of time. We often find there's a lot less reports being used than people think, and oftentimes the ones that are being used on a regular basis aren't even known to be used or certainly aren't on the top of the list. And lastly is having documented workflows. We can't emphasize this area enough. We find that clients that have well-documented processes are the easiest to upgrade. We find that there's really a couple primary reasons for that. One is testing for both the partner and the customer is easier. We both know what steps are already taken and what the expected outcome is. This makes troubleshooting a lot easier. And the other factor is that you know that all your staff does a process the same way with any given task. We all know oftentimes there's multiple ways to get the same end result in an application, but the errors might pop up if you do it in one particular sequence versus another. So next steps. It all starts with a discussion. One size doesn't fit all, and you need to have an honest conversation about the strategic vision of your company and how Dynamics NAV is going to support that vision going forward. Then you need to develop a strategy on how to best construct a plan to support that business strategy. This could be an upgrade or it could be a reimplementation, but in our experience many times it isn't really known until time is spent with the leadership team and the end users and an assessment is done. Then you need to execute the plan and get back to business, because that's, at the end of the day, what's going to help cover the expense of the upgrade in the first place. But we tell everybody don't forget to continue with a planned cadence of communication, not only during the upgrade, but after the upgrade with your IT partner. If we only talk when you have a crisis, it's much harder to have strategic decisions rather than emotional decisions when there's a problem to react to. The software used to operate your business should be an asset, but if it's not managed as one, it's easy to become a handicap. So at this point, we want to open up for questions from the attendees today and help you guys with some of the questions that you have that maybe we provoked along the way or you've been having all along.
I just want to let everybody know that if you do want to call out your question, I have unmuted everyone, so you can either mute yourself if you don't want to be heard, or you can call out a question if you do want to be heard. I do have a typed question here. What role in testing can I play as a customer to reduce the cost of my upgrade?
Yes, provider, yes. When we know this one has to sign here, we have to.
Sorry about that, guys. I was talking the whole time and I had not unmuted myself. So let me just repeat what I just said. If anybody wants to call out a question, I've unmuted all of our attendees. So if you want to remain silent, you can just mute yourself. But if you have a question you want to call out, you can go ahead and call it out. Also, you can type questions into the question box. I do have a typed question here, guys. What role in testing can I play as a customer to reduce the cost of my upgrade? Experts, I'm so sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button and muted you guys. So now I believe you're unmuted. I apologize to everybody. I didn't quite get the tech down this morning.
That's much better. So, Abby, this is Ron Massman. So as far as the some of the things that a customer can do to reduce the cost of their upgrade really is a little bit of what Ben touched on there, I guess, is there's always testing, there's always training, there's always some knowledge share with regard to new feature function in an upgrade. So, I can speak to one of the things that is helpful, and that's really probably having solid workflow documentation. And really that just enhances the ability for the customer to own more of the testing without assistance from the partner to essentially come in and help figure out what needs to be tested and what the workflows are to make sure testing is done thoroughly. So any workflow documentation that they have on their own really helps build out the test cases themselves and allows the customer to have more ownership in actually testing of the software before it's the upgraded database is moved to production.
Yeah, Ron, I could jump in a little bit on that too. Good morning, everyone. This is Chad Williams. Ron talked about your business workflows, but it's also very important. The more knowledge you can gain about the product, attending webinars like this, understanding what's going to be involved in your upgrade, working with your partner, as Ben said earlier, using the resources that out there, customer source, NAV is a great resource. But spending that time to learn the product will help you as well and help you help eliminate some of the training time that you and your staff may need from your partner. So doing that work up front, doing your due diligence to understand the product, what changes are coming, just so that you're informed, you're that much more informed getting into it. So that can help as well.
Okay, I have another question here. What types of things do companies try to do to lower costs that would be better done by the partner?
So I think, Abby, this is Ron again. So one of the things I think that Ben alluded to would be some sort of an upgrade assessment if you're considering an upgrade. So if you're, as an example, on an older version, oftentimes, a partner being involved in collaborating with you is better suited to help identify, really to have a discussion with you about what it is what are your goals and objectives for upgrading, what is it you're trying to accomplish, and trying to help identify kind of collaboratively with you what the best route forward is. So oftentimes the customer may want to kind of choose and say, hey, we're going to do an upgrade or we're going to do a re-implementation, and it's really best to have that conversation up front so that the sooner you identify clearly what it is you want, that we know what you want to accomplish through kind of that sort of assessment, the more efficient the work plan will be to actually execute and deliver on it. So the planning up front is important.
Yeah, this is Chad again. The thing I thought of there too is, you know, bringing problems to your partner is key. You know, your partner is geared and that they're really good at solving problems. So, you know, as Ron said, bringing them in and allowing them to hear the problems and the things that you're struggling through will help them, you know, help you and your partner come to the right conclusions and solve those problems correctly. You know, sometimes, you know, if you're just bringing them solutions, you know, we may miss an opportunity to do something there. So, you know, certainly working with your partner is very important, as Ron said.
Okay, we've got another question. Getting add-ons from third parties to work with new versions has been an issue with additional time and cost. Any suggestions working directly with the ISV?
This is Chad. ISVs can be a challenge, you know, when it comes to upgrades. You know, I think the main thing that we see is the delay. Is the delay when they are ready for the new version. So we will frequently see, you know, that come, you know, some ISVs are quicker, they'll release in a week or two, you know, hopefully within a month. Others are several months behind Microsoft's release, which really can create challenges with the way with the cadence that Microsoft is in right now. Doing yearly releases, so it can be difficult to stay current. So we work with those ISVs. You know, there's a lot of partners out there that have the same concerns, and working with them, trying to get those updates sooner. I'm not certain that you know, I'm not certain how much of that time could be saved by you working directly with them. We have done some of that, but I guess if it's you know, if it's an ISV that your partner doesn't have a lot of experience with, if you have some of those relationships with that vendor, bringing those to the table certainly would help, especially in a case where you have, you know, maybe been implemented by one partner and then switched partners and now are upgrading with a new partner. You know, bringing some of that to the table, if you have it, certainly could save some time and make things easier. I think that's about all I could think of at the moment. If anybody else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with what you said, Chad. It's really about, again, probably working with your partner, and if they have that relationship established with the ISV and had been involved in, you know, the deployment of it, then certainly they would have enough of a relationship with the ISV to get all the information with regard to what's new in that release of their product to go with that release of NAV. And it'd be very similar in that sense to how you would handle it on the NAV side. So if there was something specific you again wanted to accomplish as part of the upgrade relating to that ISV product, you know, then that could get identified in the planning stages up front and incorporated in the plan, you know, for execution. But you do run into cases where you're working with an ISV, maybe integrated to some other product even, that may not have been through your NAV partner. And in that case, I think you can count on the fact that your partner certainly has experience and people with skill sets that know how to navigate those waters and have those conversations. So in that case, maybe their role is more of a partner with you to help ask the right questions and help carry that conversation with that third party to help get the, you know, the appropriate information needed to make sure you can upgrade without issue.
All right, great. We have another question. How can I, as a customer, do a better job in testing the upgrade?
This is Ron again. So I would say kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier with the workflow documentation. Obviously, that's that's critical, and so the better the documentation, the more prepared you are to own that testing. And from a better job, from a quality perspective, that also leads to quality and kind of reduces some of the risk of missing something and not testing something that's critical. Most importantly, you want to at least have identified, these are the core workflows that we have. These are some unique exceptions that we have that are important to us that, would cause us, some issues if they didn't work, and to make sure that, all of those things are executed. And I think it's when your partner would probably typically do some level of testing, but how they may test, not knowing exactly how your workflows may have changed over time, or maybe not knowing exactly how they're executed in detail, is not the same level of quality testing that you yourselves can do because you are familiar with your workflows. And so if you've worked with any software, you know as you execute it slightly different in terms of a process, you can identify or run into issues that maybe someone else tested it but not exactly using that workflow, and they maybe didn't discover them. So using your own workflow and having that identified and following those as kind of your test scripts to validate it's right is the best way to control quality.
Yeah, and this is Chad again, and be diligent about that too. We have seen where customers have, they've tested their workflow, but they maybe not have tested scenarios that are that truly represent what they see in a day-in, day-out basis. So, as a very simple example, in testing, it may seem easier to just enter a very simple sales order with one line on it. But if that doesn't really represent what a sales order in your system looks like, you should really change that. You spend a little bit of extra time, create the complicated order that you do, the one with multiple lines, many lines, partial shipments, invoices, whatever. Again, that's just an example, but don't just test the simple scenarios in your workflow. Test the complex ones also, because those are the ones that are more likely to break and have issue.
Okay, our next question. Do companies usually put together a detailed project plan prior to starting or use project management software?
So Abby, this is Ron again. So I think it's a good idea to have a project plan prior to starting, certainly, but I think one of the expectations you have to be careful with is that if you're talking about, if you have certain goals and objectives and certain things you want to accomplish as part of an upgrade that you want to get out of it, or if there's some process changes you might have to make because the software is different, like Ben had mentioned earlier, or you have an opportunity to eliminate something, that assessment up front is the key to getting the information needed to develop the full plan for executing an upgrade. So without that, you can create a plan, but the plan doesn't, your partner wouldn't have the full set of information in front of them. There's a terminology we often use that says, known unknowns. So you don't know certain things about this customer if you haven't had those conversations and done that planning up front. And whenever you have known unknown situations, there's risk. There's only so much planning you can do for things you don't know about, right? So yes, having a plan up front is certainly important, but the plan oftentimes has to be done in stages as information is brought to the table so that a good plan can be developed and executed.
Okay, our next question. I've heard about the new tools released to help reduce the time to upgrade. What do they do and how do they play a role in the upgrade?
I can take that one. This is Chad. So, a lot of folks have heard about the new upgrade tools. Anybody that was probably at Convergence this week had heard a lot about it. In other sessions, Microsoft has put some emphasis on this. So just to speak briefly, I'll try not to make it too long, but essentially there's two pieces to the tools that have been released. One is to address the code upgrade part of your upgrade. So just a little bit about what that means. So the code upgrade is actually migrating your modifications from your existing database to your new database. So if you're, for example, if you're on 2009, it is taking those modifications from 2009 and porting them over to 2015. So what Microsoft gave us developers as a tool to help us with this are basically scripts, PowerShell scripts to be more specific, that we can use to help automate this this part of the upgrade. It can help, some of the pros of it are it helps help us reduce the number of conflicts that we have to address manually. So what I mean by that is, any tool that we use can do some of it without a lot of intervention. We'll go through it and it can kind of run, move things over, and it doesn't have any issue. But what can happen is it can have a conflict. So, two things have changed in the same spot and it doesn't know how to resolve that. So that's when the developer needs to go in, analyze the old and the new, analyze the modification, and figure out the best way to solve that. So these tools are much more, I'll say, NAV aware of what NAV does and how the application is built. So it's able to help not eliminate, but helps reduce the number of those conflicts. The other benefit is it can be easily repeatable and can be scripted. So instead of, again, just helping automate that process from being such a manual process. And it also works very well with existing tools. So here at ABC, we have been using technologies related to source control, Microsoft Team Foundation Server, to help us automate this part of the upgrade. These new tools will help us help come alongside and work with what we're using today. Some of the cons of it, the downsides of it, really has to do with the version that you're on. These new tools are meant to only support the new RTC objects. So you really have to be on 2013 or newer to fully use the tool. It will not work with your classic objects. So if you have, if you're running 2009 and you're running in a hybrid mode and you have classic and RTC objects, or if you're running a previous version and you're only running classic objects, it's not going to handle your data ports, those forms. It just is not aware. They just did not add that as part of what it understands, so it just doesn't support those old classic client things. The other thing it does not do is it doesn't help speed up that transformation. So if you are still kind of looking up at having to do that transformation to RTC, these tools unfortunately will not help with transforming your reports and rebuilding those for the RTC. So that's a little bit about what the first tool is and what it does. The second piece of what they've done is actually for the data upgrade piece. So that's when we, during your go live, for those of you that have been through an upgrade, when we take your system offline and we run the processes on the data to move your data from your current database to the new database with the 2015 objects, code, and your modifications. So the tool that they have released will help us with that. And again, it really focuses, once you're on 2013, this tool will play the part of that data migration, that data upgrade. So what this does above and beyond what the previous tool did, the main thing is it can run everything in parallel. So previously everything was in series and it was a very manual kind of checklist type of activity that the developer would go through. Run step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. this process now can run those steps in parallel for the ones that it can. There's some things that still need to run in series because of dependencies. But everything that it can, it runs in parallel. And then also, if you have multiple companies, previously the developer would go to company A, run steps 1 through 50. Go to company B, run steps 1 through 50. It can also run in parallel across companies. So it's running all steps 1 through 50 in parallel in company A, at the same time it's doing it in B. So what it does is it really just shrinks down that time for the go-live cutover. So, on average, over the years I've done quite a few upgrades. On average, I would say, a go-live cutover, you're looking at 6 to maybe 8 hours for an average-size database. This will help bring that down from there. I can't say necessarily for sure. It kind of depends on your database, but has potential to bring that down to maybe cut that in half or more, and then just make that time faster when you're actually down for that go live cutover. The last benefit of that is that it again allows for a lot better automation and scripting. In the manual process that I just talked through, running steps 1 through 50. Human error can interject, miss a step, do a step out of order. That pretty much is eliminated now. It can all be laid out in code, and it's run in the same sequence every time. No steps are missed. So that's try not to be too long-winded, but that's a little bit about what those new tools are and what role they play in your upgrade.
Okay, our next question. How does my current version of NAV impact the cost of the upgrade?
So I can speak a little bit to that as well. This is Chad again. Certainly you've kind of got two deltas that can come into play. So the changes in your business are one, and the other is the how old is your version. So that's what we'll address right here. But so the older your version is, the more changes there's going to be. So there's less changes between 2013 and 2015. Obviously there are more changes as you go back. So the more changes there are between the base versions. So if we say let's go back all the way to 2009. There are many more changes, and with more changes comes more risk. More risk that a modification has changed. That a modification that you have is no longer going to work, or maybe it's just not needed. So it's not necessarily so much as a risk. It's just there's more to possibly look at and to address. So there may be modifications that have to be rewritten. There may be modifications that are now replaced. There's also risk, in that data conversion. We don't see it much anymore, but every once in a while we see somebody that's running a very old data version of NAV, which I would say maybe 3.6, 3.7 or older. There were times, back then where we would even run into data issues upgrading, which required a lot of customizations to Microsoft's stock upgrade tools, the tools that I just spoke about a little bit during that data upgrade part. We've even run into times where those stock tools would not work because there was just anomalies in the customer's data that would not convert. So that's not too big of a risk anymore, especially if you're on anything higher than a 4.0 or something. We don't see that very often, but there's still a little bit of that risk. So staying current, it's less, it's less change. It's less change when you're considering mods, and it's less change for the users. There's a lot, there's less moving parts, so it just makes it easier.
And Chad, this is Ron. You can probably help me with some of this too, but certainly if you're going from a classic version to an RTC version, there's a bigger jump there. So even in terms of things like the ownership that you you would take yourself in terms of the training and the testing. Well, it becomes more complicated to do that because even if you have great workflows, you might need to spend some time with your partner to help figure out how to execute those workflows in the new version of the software. Or does the workflow have to be tweaked, or it kind of gets back into that identifying what sort of things might either impact it, what things change in your business workflows, what sort of functional changes have there been in the software, are there opportunities to do some other things. But that just gets more complicated. So that's where kind of that conversation up front again with your partner to really make sure you understand, kind of what you want to get out of it, what some of the things are you're looking to do, and really if you're focused on cost and kind of quality, I guess, of the upgrade, to some extent the narrower you make that focus to actually get upgraded, and if you want to focus on other process improvements outside of that, it's not a bad strategy. The reason for the discussion up front is that oftentimes it's really far more cost effective to do it at the same time. But certainly if you can have separation and keep the upgrade as clean as possible and really are focused on that, you can reduce the cost of that and probably increase the quality because everybody's really focused on a narrower goal, and then focus on workflow changes and things outside of that to the extent that's possible depending on the feature function set between the two versions.
Okay, our next question. Can I reuse the hardware and licensing that I already own?
I'll agree with that one, Abby. This is Ben. That's a good question. It really depends on what version you're going from and what you're going to, and whether you've maintained maintenance or software assurance on both the server licensing and CALs, but also the licensing for your Dynamics and NAV side of things. Things have changed dramatically from a hardware evolution over the last handful of years, and depending on what version you're on, you might still be running a 32-bit version of C-side or something like that. So there's factors to play in there, but if you've had maintenance and software assurance and that stuff, for the most part, you generally don't have to rebuy anything. You just have to upgrade to the newer versions.
Okay, great. What impact does what impact does reworking or removing modifications have on the upgrade?
I could start with that one. It goes a little bit back to, we were talking about the difference, how old of a version you have. So the more mods that have to be reworked or removed, it can increase the cost. If you're just removing modifications, that's not as bad. But again, if you've got a lot of modifications that have to be reworked, it's going to increase that time. And the reason it increases the time is going back to the upgrade tools. When I was talking about the code upgrade aspect of it, again, that tool can be somewhat automated. And again, if there's not a lot of conflicts, it doesn't take as much time. It doesn't take as much time from a developer to actually go in and address those conflicts. So conflicts are one thing, but now if we've got things that just need to be reworked or can't come over, it turns into more of a manual process. The modifications got to be analyzed. Depending on the extent of it, we would work, with an application consultant, a developer, working with someone on your team familiar with that area of your business to really, reanalyze, design, redesign how that should be built based on, the new version and what it's going to hook into. So all of that, it slows down that process a little bit, and it's going to increase increase the amount of time. So certainly it's necessary, if you've got modifications that you don't need, taking that time to remove them, it's just something you don't have to worry about the next time you upgrade. And then of course if it's not relevant to your business as it is today, you have to rework that. And again, work with your partner to make sure that that's being reworked in a way that, it's easier to upgrade in the future. So you always want to make sure that, those modifications, are done in a respectful way to the base code, I guess I will say, without getting too deep into a rabbit hole there. But
yeah, and I think, Chad, this is Ron. The only thing I'd maybe add to that, too, is just obviously that creates some complexity on the testing side as well. And so when we talk about risk, if we have to start changing code or modifying things, that could certainly impact, execution of the workflow. So it certainly adds some risk in that form from testing. But on the other hand, I guess, too, and Chad touched on this, is from a long-term viewpoint, it may be worth the pain at this stage to remove something you want to remove so that you don't have to deal with the cost of it in the next upgrade or future upgrades or that risk. So if it isn't any longer needed, you have some choice there. But I think would think about it in terms of the overall, how does it position you for future upgrades as well, and how does it control that cost overall is probably a good perspective to have.
Okay. Our next question, how do I determine if I should upgrade or do a re-implementation?
So I can start with that, Abby. This is Ron. So a lot goes into that. I think, if you've got, again, an older version of NAV and, business process changes have changed significantly, or requirements have even changed. And so things may have been set up or deployed in such a way at, one point in time to support how your business operated, what the business requirements were, what the functional requirements are. Those may have changed significantly. And if they've changed to the point where it requires redoing some things from a master record setup, redoing things in terms of how you use dimensions and maybe even your posting groups and different things like that. If there's a lot of that type of change, then re-implementation becomes something that you really want to take a look at. If things are pretty clean, you're not highly modified, business process hasn't really changed significantly. And if it has, over the time that it has changed, you've obviously made those changes along the way, and they're not going to change during the time period you're actually performing the upgrade. Then it's a little cleaner, obviously, the decision's pretty straightforward in that case. There are situations where, you're kind of in the middle and you want to re-implement, and you're looking for a bit of a clean start in terms of how certain things are configured and set up to support something you want to do going forward. At the same time, you may have, customizations that are really critical to your business that you feel like you want to pull forward. And that's really truly more of a hybrid, but at some point in time during that upfront assessment, and those are situations where it's really important to do that assessment, you're getting answers to those. You're evaluating those. And so there are usually some pros and cons in a decision. Ultimately, you have to kind of weigh those pros and cons and decide which route you want to go. And so it's kind of gauging how much is there that you want to maintain in terms of current customizations, or that you will have to maintain, versus what the new version of the software is capable of delivering. So those, I guess, are some of the things that go into it in terms of making that decision.
Okay. Our next question, we've touched on part of this before, but how do ISVs play into the cost of upgrades?
I could take a little bit of that. Yeah, it's a little bit of a duplicate of earlier, but yeah, it's I think the big piece of it is how, first of all, is how big of a ISV is it? So is it a smaller add-on that's got a limited amount of objects, or is it one of the ISVs that we would categorize as probably one that's database-wide, a lot of objects that they've modified, a lot of objects they've added. In the case when it's a database-wide type of ISV, and just to throw an example, LANUM, if you're on EDI, eShip, that's an example of that. What we will do in those cases is we actually, when we do the upgrade, we will have to use, instead of starting with a stock 2015 database, assuming that's the version we're going to right now, we actually have to start with a stock 2015 database with the ISV's objects in there already. So it just adds, it can add a little bit more complexity to the project. Again, it's more changes. So you've got changes for an ISV. Now, if there's not a lot of mods because of the ISV, that's good too. But you've got that as a starting point. When we talk about the data conversion tools that I talked about earlier, there are specific tools that are released by the ISVs, those that have major add-ons. So we're not only running just the conversion steps that Microsoft gives us, but we also have steps that a LANUM or Serena gives us as well that we need to run. So again, it can add to the time that we have to go to, because it really just turns into more steps, turns into more modifications in the database that we may run into, more changes as we get to that new version. Also is going to can complicate testing a little bit, and just going back to as Ron spoke about workflows and stuff, it just again speaks to the importance of those. When you have more ISVs or a lot of ISVs, having those solid processes or workflows, so you know how to go through and test those and work through those ISVs to make sure that everything is working as you expect it to. So I guess really is that at the end of the day, it creates a little bit more change to deal with, so it's going to increase the time. So
yeah, really nothing further to add there.
Okay.
Okay. Would applying updates regularly reduce the cost of future upgrades?
So Abby, you cut out on us there. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I'm sorry about that, guys. This is a question about updates versus upgrades, and would applying updates regularly reduce the cost of future upgrades?
Chad, I think that might be you again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I think it's going to, it's kind of the theme that I keep going back to is, again, it's just, so Microsoft is releasing, just to make sure everybody's aware, so Microsoft with 2013, and forward, those are the main supported versions right now, they're releasing these cumulative updates every month. Those updates include critical hotfixes, minor hotfixes, and even improvements, just new features we've seen over the last year or two. So if you are applying those regularly, it's just, again, it turns into less change when you get to the upgrade. So an upgrade, so if you're on 2013 R2, which was the last version before 2015, if you had applied all of those updates along the way, I don't want to, that doesn't mean by any means that you're, that's the same as actually being on 2015, but your jump is just that much little, or it's that much smaller from a code perspective. So again, as we said earlier, the smaller that jump, no difference, when we were talking about major versions, or if it's, from 2013 R2 with cumulative update 10 or whatever to 2015, it's just a smaller jump at that point. You still have to upgrade, but it's a smaller step, and there's less chance to run into issues, to have major reworks in your modifications because of changes that have happened in the database. Not to say that won't happen. Again, it's just about lowering the risk. So there is benefit in doing that for the upgrade, with the upgrade in mind. But I think Microsoft, really would encourage folks to do that monthly from the standpoint of there's critical fixes there as well, and the new features that they're small new features, but they're there. So rather than waiting to run into a bug, Microsoft encourages those updates to be pushed out and to be installed, so that you don't have to run into that. You don't have to run into that downtime. You don't have to run into having to send your partner an issue and have them troubleshoot and try to get to the bottom of the issue when it turns out it's a bug that Microsoft may have updated with cumulative updates. So yeah, I think that's about all I could add to that. So.
All right, I think with that we're going to wrap it up here. It's at the top of the hour. Just as a closure here, so to speak, we want to remind everyone, if you're really considering the upgrade process, you should really sit down with your partner and talk about it. And if you don't have a partner that you're happy with or whatever, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about what ABC could do potentially for your company. And as we said at the beginning, all of our webcasts are recorded. So if somebody on your team you think could benefit from listening in, they couldn't make it today, feel free to go out to our website. You can see not only today's but any of our other webcasts. And in closing, on behalf of everyone at ABC Computers, we'd like to thank you guys for joining today.